So I'm going to go through the different modules with you, all right? So we have underneath reporting, we have a reporting dashboard. So if you have used Schoolnet before, this is one module that just recently was updated in a major way. It was that all the reports are now in one place. If you don't access them from your homepage, you access them on the left side under the reporting dashboard, right? So this is where we can quickly see the different tests. We can see benchmark tests, standardized tests. We can check this box to see classroom tests only. And we can see each test. We can also see something called standards performance. So I can go under this particular one. I've only had one test, but it will have all of my standards, reading, math, whatever I've assessed my students on, right? So I can see that 10 items and my average proficiency on this particular quiz was really bad. So I'm definitely going to need to work on this standard again with my students. So Schoolnet also has this materials icon, which is the M. I call it the golden M, because if I click on it, it's going to take me right into the instructional materials that Schoolnet has that's related to that standard. So here are the related materials that are for my grade level and that particular standard. For that, I can save, which is the little heart feature, which means that I'm going to come back and look at this resource later. I can also schedule it. That has a built-in kind of lesson planner where I can schedule things. The nice thing about the lesson planner that's built into Schoolnet is that your administrators at your school can see what's on your lesson planner. So if you have, you know, an unintended absence or an emergency or something like that, you can say, hey, I've got this lesson that's scheduled out on Schoolnet, and they can look at it and print it off and make a PDF for your sub or whatever if they're able to complete that. They can also check lesson plans that way. I know some administrators still want you to turn in lesson plans. So if you gave them, said, hey, my lesson plans are on Schoolnet, it's right there. So to go back to where I was, again, you can just go back to I was under reporting, the reporting dashboard, and I can look at another report. You can also, as a teacher, see reports that your administration has built, whether it's at the school level or the district level. They may have a certain test report that they want you to build or that they've built and they want you to look at for your students. So the reporting dashboard is very comprehensive. It gives you a lot of information, and if you hover over, it gives you more detail. There we go. So it gives me more detail of my score groups. It's broken down into colors, and then I can click on anything and it's going to expand it out. So just a very easy way of looking at your data. But so even if you haven't given a classroom test yet, all your standardized tests are here, and you can view those reports. And to view the pre-formatted reports, they're right here as well. So whether you want to do a standards analysis to look at each standard, item analysis to look at different items, that's very popular with your professional learning groups, your PLCs, your PLTs, professional learning teams, some schools call it. The item analysis is very nice if you've given a common assessment to sit down and look item by item at how your students are doing. Standards Mastery is another great report that breaks down and puts your students in groups based on standard. So it takes the guesswork out of, okay, what am I doing for remediation time this week? I know exactly which students to pull because I'm just going to use the Standards Mastery report, and it already groups my students for me. Under your classroom kind of module, you have student groups, that lesson planner I was talking to you about. And then under instructional materials is where you can find the thousands of instructional materials that live in Schoolnet. So before you go pay teachers for anything, come to instructional materials. So a lot of times people will hear that Schoolnet has You know, oh, Schoolnet doesn't have any assessment items for my content area because I'm a music teacher or I'm a PE teacher. That may be the case, but we have instructional materials for all subject areas and grade levels, all right? So it doesn't matter what your subject area is. So I'm just gonna look for some STEM resources, all right? I can come in here and find whatever lessons and resources I want, right? So there's different tabs. North Carolina materials, we're also connected to the LOR, and then there's NC vetted K-12, which means that it is a North Carolina vetted resource. Any of these resources, I can click on them. The different circles indicate what type of resource it is. So we have lesson plans, enter the pink circles. We also have resources, which is an R, curricular units. So there's full instructional units. Those are IUs. And then we just have assessments as well too. So a resource is like just a brief activity or maybe a game or some kind of smartboard lesson. So then it's kind of standalone, whereas a lesson plan is more involved. And then of course a unit would contain several lesson plans over the course of the unit. So just depending on what you want, you can filter. So if you were just looking for instructional units, I would check that box and it would filter to the 4 instructional units that it has for this. And if I wanted to save it, I could click on that save icon. And then if I go back under instructional materials where it says my materials, I would now find that instructional unit, right? So your my materials is kind of your list of saves, things that you've saved to go after. So again, you can filter by subject area. You can also filter by standards. So if I go up here on the search bar and I look for North Carolina standards, and you can just start typing in your standard. So for MD4, represent and interpret data using whole numbers. All right, and so just by searching that one standard, I kind of see this map of our resources. So I have 1 curricular unit, 8 lesson plans, 3 assessments, and 8 resources that look for NC4 and D4, all right? So while we're talking about, I'm gonna jump back over into my presentation, while we're kind of jumping ahead and talking about these standards, we did this year have standards updates. So we are aware that there were some pretty significant content changes to the standards for K-8 math, especially in grades 3 through 5. So how everything works in Schoolnet is it's all aligned to the North Carolina standards. So when we started getting new standards, we were working with the curriculum teams at DPI to make sure these new standards are uploaded, everything is aligned. However, when actual content of the standard changes, every single resource, every single item for that standard has to be looked at by hand, by person, and determined if that item is still aligned to those standards, right? So for example, the standard I just talked about, NC4, MD4, had a change from where it used to include fractions, and now it does not. Now it's only whole numbers. So now every single one of our items we have to look at to make sure that there's only whole numbers there, right? In order for it to be aligned. So we're still working on that because that takes quite a bit of time. However, we're getting very close to being able to have all of the aligned items in the NCDPI benchmark and classroom item banks realigned for those particular standards that had those major content changes. If you're going, what in the world are you talking about? There's a link on this slide, on slide 9, that's from our NCDPI math department that talks about the major changes to the math standards. And it's a very helpful document because if you have any of your old tests, if say maybe you played around with Schoolnet last year and you created a test, well, if you have new standards this year, you need to go back and the best recommendation is to make a new test, because in Schoolnet, when you create a test, you actually make a copy. The system makes a copy of the items for you. So that's great because then you can edit and you can have those items that are saved to your your tests in your account. But when we have new standards, it's not going to go back and realign that old test that you made last year to the new standards. So if you are brand new and never made a test, you don't have anything to worry about, you're fine. But if you do have tests, or maybe you're using a test that someone else made in Schoolnet, you want to go ahead and look at it thoroughly, especially if you know you teach math and you know that your standards have had those major content changes. You need to make sure that you carefully check the alignment of the test, because even though all of our materials and items are the update with the alignment, that does not apply to old tests. So just food for thought that whenever we have these new standards changes, the best advice is always just to make a new test. And know that here at NCDPI, we are aware of when standards are changing, and we try to make sure that we have new items, new resources that are aligned to those new standards that are ready for you. If not, before the start of school, as soon as possible. So just keep in touch about those. All right, so we're going to go and we're going to go look at items, right? So that is the on this navigation board under the assessments module. That's kind of the big money item. You are certainly welcome to create items in Schoolnet, but a lot of people like to use the items that we already have in the item bank. So what kinds of items do we have in the item bank? So I'm going to go back and talk about this for just a second. So we have in Schoolnet, we have several item banks. We have the Certica Navigate item bank, which is part of our contract with Schoolnet. And it has, I think there's over 74,000 items in that Navigate item bank, all aligned to K-12 North Carolina standards. I will say that tested areas and subjects have the most items. Social studies has pretty good coverage in high school, and we recently added over 2,000 items for middle school social studies. Elementary, of course, math and language arts has really good high saturation, and so does science in 5th grade, but the younger grades, we don't have quite as many social studies or science items. We also have an NCDPI classroom bank, which this is where if you are old like me and you remember Classcapes, that is where the Classcapes items went to live, was in this NCDPI classroom bank. That's also where some of the released EOG, EOC items go into that NCDPI classroom bank. We also have a protected bank for district level assessments called NCDPI Benchmark. So you have to have leadership level to be able to see those items. And then we also have 2 banks for CTE items. We have CTE Middle, which of course is for middle school CTE courses, and then we have CTE Unsecure, which is the classroom items for high school level CTE courses. So we have all of these item banks in Schoolnet,